Salam, peace be on you. Phi Pattern Science, the complete foundation. Part 4. The public face of phi pattern. Why only relations delta phi are public. Let us recall where we stand. In Part 2, we met phi, the primitive permission for distinction itself. Not a thing, not energy, not space-time. Just the raw possibility that this could differ from that. In Part 3, we gave phi a shape, a circle. Not a physical circle in space, but a logical one. A circle of comparability with no privileged starting point, no universal zero, no absolute beginning. This one move quietly forced a revolution. Because a circle has no natural origin. You can choose to call any point zero, but the circle itself does not bless your choice. Your start is a convention, not a cosmic truth. And that leads directly to the central question of Part 4. If phi lives on a circle, and any point can be called zero, then what part of phi can ever be public? What can two different observers in two different places, using two different instruments, actually share and certify? This is not an abstract philosophical puzzle. It is the most practical question in all of science. Public knowledge, knowledge that can be tested, challenged, and built upon across generations, must survive the journey from one perspective to another. It must be what remains when private coordinates, personal conventions, and local choices are stripped away. So Part 4 installs the most protective rule in the entire foundation. Absolute phi is not public. Only relations, differences, and invariants built from them are public. That sentence sounds technical, but it is actually a simple, everyday truth we live by constantly. You just have not noticed it as a universal principle. A simple beginning, two thermometers, one reality. Let us start with something so familiar you never think about it. Imagine two people measuring the same cup of tea. One uses Celsius, one uses Fahrenheit. The first says it is 60 degrees. The second says it is 140 degrees. If you did not understand temperature scales, you might think they disagree about reality itself. You might imagine they are experiencing different teas in different universes. But they are not. The numbers differ because the labels differ. Celsius and Fahrenheit are different coordinate systems for temperature. They have different zeros, different step sizes, different conventions. What is public, what both observers can agree on, is not the absolute number by itself. What is public is what survives translation. This tea is hotter than room temperature. This tea is cooler than boiling water. If we wait, it will cool at a certain rate. The difference between the tea and the surrounding air is about this much. The deeper truth is not the label 60 or 140. The deeper truth is the relation. Now take away Celsius and Fahrenheit and push deeper. Imagine temperature itself was not measured on a line, but on a circle, like a clock, like a compass, like the phase of the moon. Then absolute numbers would be even more obviously conventional. What would matter even more purely would be the relations. This is exactly where we stand with phi. Any absolute label you assign to a point on the circle is a kind of private coordinate choice. It may be useful locally, it may help you do calculations, but it is not the public core. The public core is what does not depend on which labels you chose. Why absolute labels are deeply suspicious on a circle. Part 3 made the circle unavoidable because it removes privilege origin. But once you accept that phi is circle-valued, something becomes immediately obvious. If any point can be called zero, then absolute position on the circle is not a public fact. It is a choice. Think about a clock face. The number 12 is at the top by convention. But the clock itself does not have a true top. If you rotated the clock face, the numbers would still mean the same thing relative to each other. 12 o'clock is just wherever we agreed to put it. Now apply this to phi. Your phi values depend on your chosen labeling. My phi values depend on my chosen labeling. We can both be completely correct in our own label systems. And yet, our absolute values may not match at all. So if public reality is to exist, if science is to be possible, public claims cannot be built on absolute labels. This is the key shift of Part 4. Public knowledge cannot rest on private coordinate choices. The moment a claim depends on an undeclared private coordinate choice, it is no longer public science. It becomes private reconstruction disguised as public truth. So Part 4 teaches a discipline of deep humility. We do not get to claim public reality at the level of absolute phi. We only get to claim public reality at the level of what survives label change. That is the meaning of invariance. Invariance is what stays the same when you change the things that do not matter. The global shift, phi to phi plus c. Now we introduce the simplest transformation in the entire framework. It is so simple you might miss its power. A constant relabeling shift, phi to phi plus c. In plain language, you can rotate the labeling on the circle by a constant amount. You can add the same number to every phi value. It is like taking a clock and deciding that what you used to call 12 will now be called 1. It is like shifting a compass rose so that your map's north is slightly rotated. It is like resetting the zero on a thermometer. The world itself did not change. Only the labels changed. Now ask, what changes under this shift? Every absolute label attached to every point changes. 2.7 becomes 3.7. 5.2 becomes 6.2. All numbers shift. What does not change? Every relation between points stays exactly the same. If point A was 30 degrees ahead of point B on the circle, it remains 30 degrees ahead after shifting everything by the same amount. The difference, delta phi, is unchanged. This simple shift exposes the fundamental distinction between representation, the labels we use, and public content, what survives relabeling. Part 4's core claim is now unavoidable. Pattern identity cannot live in absolute placement. It must live in invariants under lawful relabeling. The first public face of phi pattern. If absolute phi is not public, then what is? The simplest answer is a tiny symbol with huge meaning. Delta phi. Pronounced delta phi. It just means difference in phi. If you and I both measure 2 points and compare them, the global shift cancels out. Your delta phi equals my delta phi, even if your absolute values differ from mine. This is why, even in daily life, we trust comparisons more than absolute numbers. This is warmer than that. This is closer than that. This melody is the same but shifted to a different key. This face matches the one we saw yesterday. This route is shorter than the other. All of these are fundamentally delta claims, even when we do not write the delta symbol. So Part 4 names the public content clearly. What is public is delta phi and invariants built from delta phi. This is not a loss of reality. This is the definition of public reality in a relational world. Deeper examples. Seeing delta phi everywhere. Once you understand this principle, you see it everywhere. Two maps of the same city. Imagine you and a friend each draw a map of the same city from memory. Your map puts the park at the center. Your friend's map puts the train station at the center. Your coordinates differ completely. If you argue about absolute coordinates, you might conclude you disagree about the city itself. But you do not. The public truth of the city is not the park is at coordinate 0, 0. That depends entirely on your choice of origin. The public truth is the relational structure. The park is 2 blocks north of the library. The station is east of the river. The bridge connects these neighborhoods. The road loops back to itself. The alley dead ends. Those relations survive shifting the coordinate origin. They are the delta phi of the city. Two translations of the same poem. Imagine two translators rendering the same poem into different languages. One uses formal language, one uses colloquial expressions. The words differ completely. The rhythms differ. The rhymes may even differ. Yet both may be translations of the same original poem. What makes them the same? The relations that survive translation, the images evoked, the emotional arc, the structure of ideas, the patterns of meaning. The absolute words are like absolute phi values. They change with each translation. The relational structure is what persists. Two photographs of the same mountain. Imagine two photographers shooting the same mountain from different angles. One shoots at dawn with soft light and long shadows. One shoots at noon with harsh light and minimal shadows. The images look completely different. The pixel values are entirely different numbers, yet both are photographs of the same mountain. What makes them the same? The relational structure of the mountain itself. The relations between summit and base, between ridges and valleys, between rock and sky. That survives the change in lighting and angle. The absolute pixel values are like absolute phi. The mountain's structure is delta phi. This is not less real. It is more real. Some people feel uncomfortable here. They hear absolute is inaccessible and worry that reality is being reduced, erased, or made subjective. Part 4 insists on the exact opposite. The loss of absolutes is not a loss of reality. It is a gain of rigor. Because what you can make public is what you can protect against hidden privilege, hidden assumptions, hidden coordinate choices. If a claim depends on an inaccessible absolute, then it cannot be checked universally. It becomes vulnerable to authority. Trust me, I have the true perspective. Hidden calibration. My instrument is secretly special. Unshared conventions. Everyone knows 0 is here. Implicit defaults. We always do it this way. Smuggled assumptions. I did not mention that choice because it is obvious. Part 4 refuses all of this. It says, public reality must be what survives lawful relabeling. It must be what can be shared across different coordinate choices, different perspectives, different instruments. That is not weak reality. That is honest reality. Think of it this way. If something is truly real, it should not depend on who is looking or what labels they use. It should be the same for all observers under all allowed transformations. That is exactly what invariants are. They are the most real things we can possibly have. The gauge relational principle in plain language. Now we can name the principle behind all of this. Physicists call it gauge invariance. In phi pattern science, it is simpler and deeper. Gauge relational publicness. What is public is what remains unchanged when you relabel your private coordinates in any allowed way. This is why we introduced the shift phi to phi plus c. It is the simplest example of an allowed relabeling. If your claim changes under this shift, then your claim is not about public reality. It is about your labeling system. So a public claim must be built from invariants under such relabelings. This principle is what later becomes the INV gate, the invariance check that every claim must pass before certification. But here in the simplest language. If your claim changes when you merely rename your labels, your claim is not about public reality. It is about your private coordinate choices. So part 4 relocates identity itself. Pattern identity lives in what survives transformation, not in private coordinate choices. 9. What becomes public? The three families. Part 4 names three main families of public content. These will reappear throughout the rest of phi pattern science. Family 1. Differences. Delta phi. The simplest public facts are relational offsets. Here versus there. Now versus then. This versus that. Differences survive global shifts. They are the atoms of public pattern knowledge. Family 2. Derivative-like quantities. From differences, we can build rates of change, how rapidly phi varies across a region. Slope, gradient, speed of variation. These are essentially differences over small distances or small steps. They inherit the same invariance as differences themselves. Think of a hill's steepness. It does not depend on where you set zero elevation. It is a relational quantity, how much elevation changes per horizontal distance. Loop residues and holonomy. Because phi is circle-valued, loops can carry memory. When you go around a closed path and return to your starting point, something may have changed. A net winding, a phase shift, a topological residue. This loop memory is invariant under relabeling. It is a public fact about the pattern, independent of coordinate choices. Think of walking around the mountain and returning to your starting point. Your elevation returns to the same value, but something else may have changed. Your orientation, your accumulated experience, the number of times you circled. That something is loop memory. These three families, differences, rates, loop residues, are the building blocks of all public pattern knowledge. 10. The rigor layer. Gates in human language. Part 4 is not just beautiful philosophy. It is a working rule of certification. So it introduces gates, checks that every claim must pass. The INV gate, invariance gate. Before any claim can be public, ask, does this claim survive lawful relabeling? If the answer is no, the claim is not yet a public phi pattern claim. It may still be useful privately. It may still guide exploration, but it cannot be certified as public. The Scope Firewall Part 4 also sets a strict scope. We are discussing the public pattern layer only. Private reconstructions may exist. Private models, private intuitions, private coordinate choices. But they are non-certifying unless translated into invariant form. This scope prevents endless confusion. Otherwise, people will say, but my instrument gives me absolute phase. And Part 4 replies, fine, but unless you declare your calibration and show invariance under lawful relabeling, your absolute is not public foundation. It is a private coordinate choice. Not an insult, just discipline. The WF gate, well-formedness gate. Part 4 must keep its concepts clean. No vague appeals to relativity as mere metaphor. No collapsing into everything is subjective. No confusing not absolute with not real. The concept must remain crisp. Public reality is invariance. 11. Firewalls. What Part 4 must block? Because Part 4 is where many frameworks secretly import hidden assumptions, it needs explicit firewalls, protections against common distortions. Firewall 1. No absolute FIDA-dependent claims as public claims. If a claim depends on an undeclared absolute label, it is not public. Period. Firewall 2. No hidden coordinate privileges. If a coordinate system is being treated as the real one, without declared justification, it is smuggling. Firewall 3. No, my instrument gives absolute phase without declaration. Instruments give readings. Readings become public only through declared calibration and invariance checks. The raw reading is not the public pattern. Firewall 4. Do not mourn the loss of absolutes. This is important psychologically. A foundational science should not grieve over lost absolutes. It should celebrate the gain, public checkability, shared reality, protection from hidden privilege. A public science that depends on private absolutes is not stable. It becomes mythology, wearing technical clothing. 12. What Part 4 gives us? Certification outputs. By the end of Part 4, we have installed 5 certified outputs that will support everything that follows. 1. The publicness criterion. A public claim must be relational or invariant. It must survive lawful relabeling. 2. Gauge discipline. Relabeling phi by phi to phi plus c must not change public content. 3. Delta phi as first public content. Differences are public. Absolute labels are not. 4. Identity relocation. Pattern identity lives in invariants, not private coordinates. 5. The 3 families. Differences, rates, and loop residues are the building blocks of public pattern knowledge. These outputs become the foundation for every later part. Anti-smuggling, canonicalization, persistence, topology, defects, measurement, public science, and more. 13. Refusal conditions. When Part 4 says no. Part 4 must be able to refuse claims that fail its tests. These refusal conditions are not punishments, they are protections. Refuse any claim that depends materially on undeclared absolute labeling. Confuses representation values with public pattern identity. Treats local gauge choices as absolute truths. In everyday terms, if your claim changes when you merely rename your labels, your claim is not yet public science. It may be a private model. It may be a convenient coordinate system, but it is not a certified public pattern invariant. 14. Why this matters. Beyond sign. Part 4 is not only about physics-style gauge ideas. It is about the ethics of public truth itself. It is the difference between, trust me, I have the true coordinate system, and here is what remains true even if you change coordinates. The second is what makes science travel across time and culture. It is what makes knowledge cumulative rather than tribal. It is also what makes honest conversation possible between people who start from different assumptions. In a disagreement, people often argue over absolute interpretations. You said this. No, I meant that. The public resolution is not in private meanings alone. It is in what can be made invariant and shareable. Here is what we can both agree was said. Here is the shared structure we can both examine. Here is what remains when we strip away our private framings. That is delta phi thinking applied to human life. Shared relations over private absolutes. So part 4 is foundational not only scientifically but civilizationally. It is the pattern-level basis for the possibility of shared truth in a world of diverse perspectives. The handoff. Why part 4.5 is now necessary. Now the next danger appears immediately. If publicness is defined as invariance, if only relations and invariants count as public, then a clever or careless person can fake invariance by hiding their choices. They can manufacture the appearance of relational structure where none exists. How? By hiding the pre-processing steps that shape the data. By hiding the boundaries where the pattern was cut off. By hiding the canonicalization that normalized away variation. By hiding the scale changes that made structure appear. By hiding the reference class against which difference was measured. So in other words, invariance can be counterfeited by smuggling. Hidden choices can produce apparent invariants that are not really there. This is the central corruption mechanism of pattern science, and it is why part 4 must be immediately followed by part 4.5, the anti-smuggling principle. Because once invariants become the currency of public reality, the main threat becomes producing fake invariants by hiding the steps. Part 4.5 will teach us how to recognize smuggling, how to prevent it, and how to protect the purity of public pattern certification. But that is the next chapter of our story. This has been part 4 of the Phi Pattern Science Foundation. The journey continues with part 4.5, the anti-smuggling principle. Always, peace be upon you.